Space, the final frontier. These are the words that began the journeys of the imaginations of a multitude of generations. Imagine a world where humankind has managed to solve its problems like hunger, war, disease, man's inhumanity to man. Imagine humanity not only moving past these civilization-defining issues, but managed to venture into the unknown, into outer space, hence the final frontier. During a time of civil upheaval, war, discrimination, and even assassination, a man named Gene had a vision. This vision was to see mankind venture off into the stars, a wagon train to the stars, where a starship and its crew set out to map out and explore the unknown reaches of space, while taking with them the wisdom and the best that humanity has to offer. Hence, the show Star Trek was born, with the help of solid writers and creators over the course of 4 decades of solid, consistent content and a fan base that has been responsible for several revivals of the brand. Star Trek is a project that has turned into a phenomenon that has touched the hearts of millions of people, especially my own. I grew up in the 90s, and in the mid-90s, Star Trek was everywhere. There were toys, magazines, films, and 2 shows airing at the same time. I also noticed Star Trek was widely referenced in a lot of cartoons I watched as a kid. When I started adolescence, I saw the 1995 reissuing of the original Star Wars trilogy prior to the special editions, and that launched my interest in science fiction, and later I discovered the 6 Star Trek films, and I immediately took a liking to them because of their story and the fact that their characters were so likable. I later clung on to Star Trek the original series because of the 60s production values to me were exotic and unique, from the memorable composed music to the cheesy and very colorful sets, and the acting, which drew me to collecting the VHS tapes for a long time. And that was a long journey until I finally saw all the episodes when the seasons were released to DVD in the mid-aughts. Star Trek began as a series in the 1960s, and like most 60s television, was designed to be episodic so that any viewer can tune in at any time without having to see the previous episodes. Therefore, episodes very rarely reference the previous episodes, or episodes that came out previous seasons. Most episodes usually involve the Starship Enterprise crew, usually ventures out to a planet, or an alien ship, or some sort of phenomenon that presents a problem to the crew, or to the guest aliens or planet inhabitants of that particular episode of the show. The crew under Captain James T. Kirk are the best that humanity has to offer, as the Enterprise is the flagship of Starfleet Command, a military and scientific branch of the United Federation of Planets. Other characters include Lieutenant Uhura of Communications, Lieutenant Sulu, the helmsman, Ensign Chekhov, the navigator, who was introduced as a new Russian character in Season 2, Lieutenant Commander Montgomery Scott, Scotty, the ship's chief engineer and miracle worker, Nurse Chapel, assistant to Dr. Leonard McCoy, chief surgeon and doctor. And lastly, but most certainly not least, Mr. Spock, a half Vulcan, half human science officer and the first officer to Captain Kirk. Throughout the show, the writing of the episodes utilized the characters if they were generally needed to fill a role that was relevant to the plot. Like if there was a problem that affected the ship directly, then Scotty was generally incorporated into the episode. And the same for the supporting cast. But the backbone and the heart of the show lies with the triad of characters, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. Known as the Star Trek Triad, these 3 characters generally were the ones that went on the majority of the adventures, usually to an unknown planet to investigate an issue or to learn something. Mr. Spock, being half Vulcan, was generally the unemotional, logical, and pragmatic member of the group, whereas Dr. McCoy, Bones, as Kirk always calls him, is the polar opposite, usually questioning Spock's humanity and usually acting as a thematic counterpoint to the Vulcan. And Kirk has to be the leader, the one to weigh in both sides before making a decision. So basically, Spock and McCoy are basically, the angel and the devil on his shoulders, and he has to come to a decision that usually affects the outcome of the episode. Types of episodes vary in tone throughout the 3 seasons of the show, but they all have an adventurous charm that can attract people of all ages. Some shows, like the first aired episode, are horror, where they go to a planet and encounter some sort of vampiric creature that kills, and that repeats throughout the show. And also, some discuss very serious issues like racism and classism. Some are comedic, where they encounter numerous absurd aliens or even enter a fish out of water like situation. Some can be tragic. And some are character driven. From a civilization that fights their wars with computers, to civilization destroying parasites, to super beings of frightening caliber, the balance of all these different genres for all ages, and the fundamental escapism that this show provides, is the reason fans have been loyal and clamored to this property for multiple generations. This show, like many other 60s television shows, has not aged well by today's standards, so there is an alternative if you do not care for the very limited cheesy visual effects. For the released Blu-rays back in 2008, Star Trek was remastered in HD, and the visual effects were redone to give it a more modern twist, but unlike the Star Wars Special Edition, these changes were not only praised, but could be watched alongside the original versions, making it a win-win for Star Trek fans alike. As I have said earlier, this show is episodic and very rarely references previous episodes, and since this series was canceled after its 3rd season, there was no series finale. Never fear though, because there is one fan series that almost perfectly satisfies this itch. That show is Star Trek Continues. This series was created with express love and admiration for every aspect of Star Trek, from the music, to the lighting, to the sets, and to the cinematography, making it look almost no different than the 60s series. I will say that this series follows up from threads introduced in Star Trek, the original series, and concludes its 5-year mission with a finale that takes you straight back to the pilot. Which one? You'll find out. As of this recording, there has been a lot going on in world events for the past year, and that has cascaded into many different things, and it has caused people to become afraid of what is to come. Here's where Star Trek can come in and share some of the wisdom that the writers were able to convey on the screen. So therefore, here's a message from the captain. Ready for you, Jimmy.
You know the greatest danger facing us is ourselves, an irrational fear of the unknown. But there's no such thing as the unknown. Only things temporarily hidden, temporarily not understood. In most cases, we have found that intelligence, capable of a civilization, is capable of understanding peaceful gestures. Surely a life form advanced enough for space travel is advanced enough to eventually understand our motives. All decks, stand by.
Thank you for watching. If you're interested, please share this video, hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment. Remember, it's okay to be nerdporial. On the next episode, I will be discussing my introduction and recommended viewing order to the original 6 Star Trek films, featuring the original crew. What do these films entail? Do they begin a new chapter for the crew as they get older? Are the crew still effective against adversity in their older age? Will Kirk ever experience true loss? Will McCoy ever win in an argument against Spock? Will I ever stop promoting make-believe and get a life?
Get a life, will you, people? I mean, for crying out loud, it's just a TV show.
All these questions and more from the Nerdporial Lifeform presents a layman's guide to the original 6 Star Trek films and the order to watch. Stay tuned.